This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Robonzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Hey there, loyal listeners. Would you like to help other independent musicians find this podcast? Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast service. It really helps. Would you like to support the podcast? Join the Unstarving Musician community. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com and join right there on the homepage. If you're an independent musician, you'll be glad you joined because I share tips and lessons you can use in your music journey. And this isn't just coming from me and my years of experience as a gigging musician. It also comes from the hundreds of other musicians and songwriters I've talked to as part of the Unstarving Musician Project, including those I've interviewed for this podcast. And it's all free, just for being part of the community. Another way to support the podcast is to pick up a copy of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. You can get your very own paperback or Kindle version on Amazon, and you can find it just about anywhere fine ebooks are sold. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? They've come up on this podcast several times. Many of my guests use it to power their artist website. You may have heard me say in recent episodes that I was contemplating the launch of a subscription-based service of my own. Well, you know what? These guys have it figured out already. I know because I've had the grand tour. I recently signed up for an account too. You'll see my artist website powered by Bandzoogle soon. I just have to untangle it from unstarvingmusician.com. It's complicated, trust me. Bandzoogle's not complicated. From garage bands to Grammy winners, Bandzoogle powers websites for thousands of musicians around the world. Their simple step-by-step system will get you online fast. Dozens of mobile-friendly templates will help you customize your design and content. It's built for musicians by musicians. Bandzoogle has all the features you need for your website and your EPK already built in, including a merch and download store to sell music and merch commission-free right on your website. You can use the tour calendar to promote your shows and sell tickets commission-free, mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send professional newsletters, integrations to pull in content from all of your online services, including Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud, and live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes hosting and your own free custom domain name. Go to bandzoogle.com to start your 30-day free trial, and be sure to use the promo code ROBONZO to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO to build your website today.
Hey, it's Bree Noble from the Female Entrepreneur Musician and Women of Substance radio podcast. I just want to congratulate you, Robonzo, on reaching the 100th episode. Let me tell you, as I know, this is no small feat. So congratulations for sticking with it. Podcasting is a long game, and it takes a lot of guts and stick-to-itiveness and planning to get to episode 100. So congratulations. Thank you for serving the music community. I know that all of your listeners really appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on your show a couple times. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Hey there, musicians and music fans. Yes, this is episode 100. When I started the podcast, I had no idea how rewarding it was going to be to speak with all of the talented, creative, beautiful, and giving people that I've had an opportunity to speak with for the podcast. I wanted to do something a little different to honor them and you, and decided on a best of compilation, which recognizes a few of the most popular episodes, largely based on listener downloads, almost entirely based on listener downloads. It was tough choosing, though, which episodes to feature, even with the data, because there were 8 or so that really stand out as among those most popular. So I think there will be another one sometime soon. Let's get the show on the road, so to speak. And by the way, thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting the podcast. It means everything to me, really. First up is Mark Wenner. He's founder frontman of the American blues roots band the Nighthawks. His appearance was back in episode 30, and I gave you a little snippet here that during which we talk about labels and the changes he's seen in that aspect of the business. extending this massive tour circuit that his band was part of and continues to be part of today, and the many, many noteworthies he and the Nighthawks have worked with. Here is me and Mark Wenner. You've mentioned the time span a couple of times here, that the time span in which the band has been playing together, and I was looking at your current tour schedule. It looks very busy, and then in reading in the early history, it looked like you wanted to be a career musician from the outset. You guys look like you have a rather grueling tour schedule.
Well, nothing like it used to be, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you looked at what we did from 76 to 86, that was 300 days a year. We played in 49 states and 10 different countries. And, we kind of came home, did the laundry, and left again. And that's nothing like, I mean, our schedule looks busy, but there's a lot of stuff we're driving home from. I mean, this Friday, I drive 2 hours, play a show, and drive home. There's a lot more of that.
Yeah.
A lot less of getting in the van and coming back 6 weeks later. I think the first time we did a 7-week run, we decided it was too complicated to not be home when the bills came up, once a month. We kind of figured there wasn't really any place we couldn't get to and get back in between 3 and 4 weeks. Even driving to and from California can be done in 3 weeks if you don't work your way out and work your way back. You just, deadhead out there, be out there for a couple of 3 weeks, and then deadhead back. We once did Hermosa Beach to my house in 49 hours, I think. That's a little insane, and we were much, much younger, but, and I certainly don't, it just, we whacked a whole bunch of sections. I haven't been to the northwest of the U.S. in 35. The last tour I did out there was in 86, so that's 30-some years ago.
Yeah.
And Texas fell off the map like 20-some years ago. It's just, I'm going to Texas myself for a James Cotton tribute, but I'm going to fly down there and be there like a day and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you got to where, well, we can handle it. We can get out to the Midwest once a year. We go to Florida twice a year and up to upstate New York twice a year. But, that's enough. Now, the irony is, this last album we did just got phenomenal reviews everywhere and got airplay everywhere. And if I was 20, I wouldn't even be home right now. I'd be in the van, on my way to Vancouver or something like that, because that's kind of what that's all about. But I got just a hustle email from some guy in Europe that he could put together these tours and radio promos and this and that. And I wrote back and said, you're only like 40 years too late, pal. I'm not doing it.
I had an artist on recently who's different genres he's kind of been pigeonholed in the power pop genre, but he's had a, 20, 30 plus year career. And part of his career is actually working with his label as part of the production team. But he and I and another more recent guest, a younger guy who's kind of a newcomer to professional music. He's in the metal genre, completely different here, but they've used labels, and he was talking about the benefit of having a label in metal anyway, for being able to get along on festivals, and he was speculating on the future of labels and what they might look like. And I'm just kind of curious, since you've been working with them for as many years as you have, if you either, can you tell me what changes you would anticipate might happening, or what changes you've seen?
Well, I've run the gamut. I have had big labels, little labels, good labels, bad labels, my own labels, other people's labels who just let me use their name, and basically I did everything for. It is changing. I mean, you can just record something on your computer in your living room and put it out there on the internet anymore. I mean, labels have become, in some ways, much less important to the distribution of music. They still exist, and they still seem to be, have their function. my relationship with labels, I said I've paid for absolutely everything except the use of someone's label's name, and ordered the CDs from the pressing plant, and they all come to my house, and I've had 1,500 CDs stacked up in boxes all over my house, and then I've worked with Mercury for a horrible year, where they did every bad thing that could happen to you on a major label happened to us. I guess they're going to continue to exist, but the kids have proved it. I had a very good friend who's been in the music business, but not a player, and some of his sons have played. And when one of his sons was 16, I went to see them play. They're from California. I'm in D.C. That's 3,000 miles apart. They were playing across the river in Virginia in what turned out to be just a house, a basement of a rental house. When I asked, I thought it was going to be a church or some community center or something. I was looking for the address, and I stopped and asked a guy mowing his lawn, and he acted like I was the invading enemy or something. Like, oh, that house. Oh, it's down there, These basically punk bands were playing. There'd be like 8 bands at a show. Everybody does like 25 minutes. And there were a whole bunch of these, hipster little kids, and I felt like the chaperone or the scoutmaster or something. These kids showed up. They were somebody's mom's minivan with a U-Haul trailer. The U-Haul trailer had sleeping bags and skateboards on top of the gear. They had played every night from L.A. to D.C. And they had people there waiting, all excited. Do you have copies of your new CD? We have the old one. How these kids in Virginia and Maryland knew about this band of 16-year-olds from L.A. I mean, obviously they weren't being played on MTV or anything. I mean, this was eye-opening to me to see this complete circuitry, this complete network that was going on totally external to anything I was aware of in any industry that I was aware of. And I was pretty blown away by that. This was in the last 20 years, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. But then again, when I was first starting out and looking at, well, how do I have a blues band or a roots band that's able to put out music and tour and do this stuff? Because I never expected for there to be the degree of crossover that somebody like Thorogood or the Thunderbirds were able to pull off. Mm-hmm. I was working on that myself and never could pull it off myself. And people I was associated with and had helped along myself were able to break through somehow. It seems like every 7 years, somebody kind of bluesy breaks through into the mainstream. It was Thorogood, and then Stevie Ray, and then the Thunderbirds, and then Robert Cray, mm-hmm. all of whom opened for the Nighthawks before they got famous. We were figuring maybe we should open for ourselves or something at one point.
Yeah, you're a good luck charm for others.
Yeah, but each of those characters had something that we didn't quite have tightened down and able to pull off either a song or a look or both. But in 1972, when I was starting out here in D.C., D.C. was the bluegrass center of the universe. I don't know if you're aware of that at all, but
no.
It's because of where we're located in relation to the Appalachian Mountains and where that music came from, and the fact that D.C., it's no one really seems to understand internationally, is a factory town. And it's a town that has drawn in the whole last century, when there was a depression or a war or anything else, there were jobs in D.C.
Right.
And people came from Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Virginia, North and South Carolina and Maryland, and they came here and they had jobs and they brought their music with them. Not only, a great deal of fantastic African American music, but a great deal of hillbilly music. And some of the biggest stars in bluegrass music were working out of D.C. in the D.C. area. Were recording on labels based out of the D.C. area. They were selling records. They were getting airplay on bluegrass shows on college radio or whatever. But I was looking at this, and I lived in the neighborhood with the Seldom scene, and the Country Gentlemen were playing. There was a joint up the street from us that the Country Gentlemen, the Seldom scene, people like that were playing on a regular basis. So,
And these are bluegrass bands?
Major star bluegrass stars. I mean, the Country Gentlemen, the Seldom scene, SCENE, in the 60s and 70s and 80s were, ruled the world. Of course, Ralph Stanley and Bill Monroe still live down in Southern Virginia, but believe me, they came up here a good bit. And there were bluegrass festivals all around this area.
Who was the other band with the word gentleman in it?
The Country Gentlemen.
Country Gentlemen, thank you.
Yeah, and there's a crossover. The mandolin player played in both the bands I mentioned, John Duffy. I started trying to figure out, well, I can maybe, develop my own little world like this. And interestingly enough, as we started touring, okay, you got to understand that Muddy Waters in the mid to late 70s was touring. He had a band, mostly Chicago guys, but now there was a couple of younger white guys in the band. So everywhere they would go, the local blues band would open for them, right? Mm-hmm. Us here, the Thunderbirds in Texas, Room Full of Blues up in Boston. Now, Bob Margolin, who was the guy you see in The Last Waltz playing with Muddy, who looks a little Bob Dylan-like, who I still do work with, he was very accessible. Jerry Portnoy, the harp player, was a little hard to get, but Margolin was very accessible, easy to talk to. If you were not even an opener, but just just watching the show, you could probably talk to Bob. Bob would go out and jam with local bands. Bob would carry cassettes back and forth. The first time I heard the Thunderbirds was on a cassette player driving to Charlottesville, Virginia with Bob Margolin to open a show for Muddy Waters. And I'm listening to Kim Wilson and the Thunderbirds going, holy Christmas, who are these guys? Well, within a year, I was able to book the Thunderbirds in D.C. I had a great situation here where I could not only bring in Chicago guys, but the bands like the Thunderbirds who were out there playing this kind of music. We had an interactive circuit. So I developed a circuit that took me to and from Boston and to and from Atlanta. Well, going to Boston, there was a whole interworld of Boston bands that were influenced by the Chicago bands who were traveling from Chicago to back and forth, Chicago to Boston. It developed a circuit across New York State, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany. There were clubs where blues bands could play. So once I got to Boston and once I got related to Muddy Waters, I could plug in and go from Boston across I-90 all the way to Chicago ultimately. Now, there were bands that were in Austin, Texas that were traveling to and from Atlanta. Omar and the Howlers, Marcia Ball, Delbert McClinton, and ultimately the Thunderbirds and Stevie Ray going to and from Atlanta. Well, I started encountering them in Atlanta. So in 78, after, 76, I started going up and down. In 78, I was able to go out to Chicago, to Denver, down to Austin, back through New Orleans, back home. And that was 1978. 1980, I was able to go to Seattle to San Diego, back home. But the Seattle to San Diego was with opening for Muddy Waters the whole way.
Mark, how were you nurturing that circuit, or how did it develop such that you're able to sort of extend the touring circuit, or how did all the relationships come together?
Well, I was aggressively contacting people. Once I got a phone number for I knew the Thunderbirds were going from Austin to Boston, staying a week or two like we would, and then they'd go all the way back home. Well, I got a phone number for Jimmy Vaughn. I said, dude, on your way to Boston, I can get you $500 on a Monday. Now, they were making $500 for a week in Boston.
I'm darned.
So this was pretty attractive. And then the next time he was coming through D.C., just going to Boston, they stopped and played here and just blew everybody away. Same thing with Thorogood. No one had ever heard of Thorogood. But I met him in Boston, but I've been trying to find him for a couple of months because we were overlapping in Baltimore. He's an hour north of Baltimore. I'm an hour south of Baltimore. People were saying, oh, there's a guy that comes in here and plays this slide guitar stuff like you guys do, these Elmore James songs, Madison Blues and Dust My Broom. They said, a guy from Delaware is playing this music? I don't believe it. Guy walked up to me outside the Speakeasy in Cambridge, Mass. and said, I'm George Thorogood. I've been wanting to meet you. I said, well, I've been wanting to meet you too.
Next up is Mike Dawson, managing editor at Modern Drummer Magazine, co-host of the Modern Drummer podcast, studio and live drummer for hire, one of the most creative guests I've ever had on this podcast. He was featured in episodes 125 and 50, and this clip you're going to hear from episode 1 is, yes, from episode 1, and I was very, very excited it was episode 1 after all. I think I started to calm down a bit, but you may hear a little bit of excitement in my voice. Here's me and Mike Dawson. Do you meet many musicians that work at your level or that you work with that don't have some sort of similar background in terms of their education, their formal education?
Yeah, probably. If it's not 50-50, it probably weighs to the majority of people, or more self-taught and self-instructed, or never went through school, just took lessons or something of that sort. Mm-hmm. It just depends on what level of gig it is. What I found that when I get into, or when I'm, meeting people who are playing more high profile gigs, it tends to sway the other way, where they have more experience and more education and more, more, like most of them can read music. Like that becomes more of the case in certain genres. There's successful rock bands that don't know any of the chords they're playing, but like if you're talking about jazz or any of that kind of art form, it tends to go the other way. We're probably the vast majority who are schooled or formally schooled.
Sure.
So in my life, there's definitely in every gig there might be, the bass player might have never taken a lesson in his life. The guitarist might have a master's degree. It goes back and forth, but probably slightly favors the non-schooled player for the working musician who plays clubs on the weekends and mostly top 40 type stuff. That seems to be the case.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging in a way, and in other ways it tells me I have a lot of work to do personally.
Myself included.
Yeah. I've thought a lot more recently about what would it take for someone like me who's predominantly self-taught and is later in life being more serious about expanding my skill sets and having a desire to learn styles that I've never known in the past. What would it take for someone like me to near these sort of high-profile gigs, or just something outside of the club, festival things? I've gotten some invitations to do things that are different, which reminds me, I want to tell you when I first learned dynamics was in, I don't even know if they use the term junior college anymore, but when I first started college, I went to junior college, which is one of those places they send you when your math skills or something else are lacking so you can catch up and go to the real one. But I took a music class, and they put me in with the chamber singers group. So there was basically singing and drums and maybe a French horn or something, and talk about somebody who had to learn quickly because I've been playing, basically just pounding them all the years prior to this. But anyway, that's amazing that you learned it at such a young age.
And it was reinforced all throughout. Like I remember had I not have studied classical music, which basically when I think of studying classical music, you're learning touch and sensitivity and dynamics more than anything. It's all about producing the right sound at the right dynamic at the right time. It's very rarely about playing a difficult part. So anyway, I was in high school playing all the community theater gigs in my town. So every summer that's basically how I made money, was playing community theater. And one summer it was a small theater production in a black box style theater, which, if you're not familiar, is just a square room where the musicians and the actors are all like on the floor together. And we were doing the Who's Tommy. And no microphones, everything was just open air. So I was having to play like Keith Moon while playing at a dynamic below the volume of the child singer, because it was actually a youth musical. So you've got children, teenagers who don't have a full voice yet singing the Who's Tommy, and I'm having to play like a crazy Keith Moon in the back. So, and I was probably 17, so it was just another, again, like thankfully I had learned to play very quietly as a young player, because I couldn't have done that. How could you possibly play that music at an inch off the drums and not have it just sound silly? So yeah, dynamics have been number one for me since the very beginning, without even realizing it. I just knew it. I just had to. I couldn't work if I couldn't play quieter than a singer.
Yeah. And I venture to say that you wouldn't have even been invited to do it had you not been known for having that, accumulated or acquired that skill set of dynamics already.
Yeah, possibly.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I mean, what I realize is that a drummer who can play quietly is hard to come by. It really is.
I've seen this myself too. What are you passionate about musically today that you have the opportunities to do or play or be involved in, whether it's playing or recording? I've kind of enjoyed everything that is at least has some sort of authenticity or creativity or emotional element to it. So I'm always trying a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm currently playing with a really loud modern rock band, which kind of satisfies that aesthetic. Yeah.
I'm a 90s kid, Nirvana was one of my favorite bands. So it kind of satisfies that of just getting to just go and just let loose and sweat and all that.
Yeah.
I also play in an ensemble. It's a trio that is electronic based. They call it Latin folkloric electronica. So it has elements of Andean folkloric music and then electronic music. So I'm triggering samples and loops while also playing kind of tribally acoustic drums.
Wow.
So that kind of satisfies a certain a challenge. Like I'm always up for a challenge. And when I got that project, I was like, all right, I have to sound like a machine, but give it the feel of a folkloric percussionist. Okay, great. Let's do it. So that, that is satisfying me in that realm of, it's like I'm trying something that I've never done. No one is playing this stuff, like I'm playing it right now. Not that I'm doing anything different or revolutionary, but I kind of created my own thing with that band.
You may be, you never know.
Yeah. And then I have other projects that are, really professional projects where it's, we show up to the gig, nobody rehearses or anything. You just show up and you play, and it's top notch. The sound is always great, but I'm just playing basic 2 and 4 all night, and it's still very satisfying.
Yeah,
because the music is just such a high level of professionalism where it feels great to be in a band where you don't have to worry about anyone making mistakes or any of that kind of thing. You just show up, play, people enjoy it. It's awesome. And then I've found that I really, really love recording. So that's kind of been my primary outlet in the past 8 years or so. I just love the art of recording. It kind of totally satisfies me. All of that stuff that I just talked about in the live world, I can then do in the studio as well. It's always different type of tracks coming in, different artists, different styles. I'm always trying new setups and new mic techniques and new tunings and everything I can do to make that song unique. As I can. Your
enthusiasm really shows. For those who are listening or will listen, Mike puts a lot of great content on both Facebook and YouTube, and I guess Instagram now. You can hear some of that stuff as well. And I'm always the word I'm looking for, fascinated, and in the different things that you'll get into. That one of the more recent ones, which caught me a little by surprise, but it's so cool is where you're bringing in the electronic sounds and playing over loops and just, I don't know, kind of grooving in it or almost meditating in it. How did you, was that a gear thing that sort of got you started, or what inspired you to do that?
It's, that's always been, electronics and acoustic drums have always fascinated me. Like I bought a drum machine as soon as I had enough money and they were affordable enough for me to buy one. So I like the concept of programming drums and playing over top of it. It's always fascinated me. I think it might be because I kind of started playing drums right when hip hop hit the mainstream. So there was always that like element of a James Brown, really organic sounding drum beat, but then all this electronic hand claps and stuff happening.
Right.
So my goal with especially lately has been to take all this gear that I've amassed, which is a bunch of effects processors and drum pads and things, and not spend too much time preconceiving an idea. So I go down in the studio. This is kind of like my morning meditation, quite honestly. I'll go down in the studio. I just turn everything on. I just find some sounds in my electronics that inspire me, a pattern that kind of inspires me. I step on the loop pedal, loop what I just did, and then I play the live drums over top of it. I record it, I edit it, and then I post it all within the same couple hours. So it's all just like a one-time thing. If you ask me to go back and reproduce any of those videos I've ever done, I would have no idea exactly how I did it. It's all pure inspiration, creative practice, exploration, and getting used to the idea of can I record something that I think sounds cool and is creative without thinking too much about it, without practicing it too much, without spending too much time mixing it or editing it or fixing it. Most of those things are, one or two takes. I might do a couple, passes if the looper doesn't work perfectly, but that's largely it. That's kind of been my goal, was to just be something creative, create something new that I've never done before as often as possible, and then not stress out about it. But it's funny because I've had some guitarists and bass players like, dude, let's let's form a trio, but let's do those things that you did. I'm like, sorry, they're gone. I'd have to do completely fresh ideas because those were expelled and they are gone. Yeah. Well,
and it shows, and I mean that in a nice way, that you are almost just down there jamming, and it's wonderful to see the confidence and the ability for you to do that and make them sound and look cool too, in those cases where you're putting out the video. So you said something that brought me to something, nothing related to music really, but I wanted to know if you were a night owl or a morning person, and you just said that this was kind of your morning meditation. So are you kind of an early rise guy, and do you get out there and start doing some playing and recording right away, or?
Just because I have to, because my job is 9 to 5. And then by the time I get home after, working at the magazine all day, my brain's usually fried. And then, I also have to spend time with my wife and dogs. And so I don't really get a ton of evening time. The evening time that I have to play music is usually spent on either recording tracks for someone that's waiting for them, or, because I have to deliver.
Yeah.
Or I'm just, or I'm doing product demos for Modern Drummer. Like my evening time in the studio and on the drums is usually not creative. It's usually a job specific thing, or I'm playing a gig, or I'm rehearsing. So my morning, I have basically a window between 7 a.m. to 8:30 where I try to sneak in some time on the drums. So I'm not a morning person at all. And I learned something kind of cool, which is good. I feel like if I can go down on the drum set, because normally what I do is I wake up, chug a glass of water with some lemon and apple cider vinegar, have a cup of coffee, then go to the drum set. And I found that if I can go to the drum set on like that cold and still play at an acceptable level, when I go to the gig at night, I feel like I'm on fire. Like it's 10 times better. My body's moving smoothly and my brain is clear. So it's been another challenge. Like, can I play well at 7:30, well enough to like deliver a track to somebody and they're going to pay me for it?
That reminds me.
Little challenges.
That reminds me. I up until we moved out of the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, I was playing with a quartet, and there was a couple, female singer and the bassist, and they both studied music at USC, and she was telling me once upon a time that as far as vocal warm-ups were concerned, you could do it any time of day and you're good. you've really done a lot for your ability to stay warmed up for the entire day. And I wonder if your morning has a similar effect. You go in there in the morning and you can show up in the evening hours later, maybe not having sat on a drum set since the morning time, and have a similar type of warm-up effect. And it sounds like that's what's happening for you.
I think so. I think it's a combination of just throughout the day you're moving your body more, so you're looser, but it's also a confidence builder, which I think is really important. And I kind of picked that up from I listened to a lot of Tim Ferriss's podcasts, and
yeah, so do I.
I believe he had, I think it was General McChrystal was on, and he talked about, like, if you set yourself up first thing in the morning to achieve something, then you're going to just feel good throughout the rest of the day. And he even broke it down as simple as, like, get up and make your bed, because then at least you accomplished something.
Yeah.
You made your bed. And then exercise first thing in the morning. So I kind of, replaced those acts with, all right, get up and do something creative, something on the drums. So then if you do nothing else for the rest of the day, you don't feel like you lost the chance to become a better drummer.
As far as music goes, and for you, that's not only playing, obviously, it's recording and perhaps even the gig with Modern Drummer. But over the years, for being able to work in music as you have, what business skills have you picked up that you found to be most helpful that others might want to think about working on?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't have a lot of experience outside of the music industry, so I can't really say what would or wouldn't work in other worlds. But for my experience, and many other people have affirmed it with telling me the same story, is to be successful in this industry, it's almost all word of mouth and reputation. So professionalism, just basic professionalism, has been such a huge thing for me. Like, I've had numerous gigs where, for instance, an artist was coming in from Australia and her drummer couldn't make the show. And it was like a big showcase show. And he had a prior commitment that he wasn't going to be able to fly in time to get to the show. So I got called on Tuesday, Wednesday, and the show was that Saturday. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like learn these cover songs. It was, here's 40 minutes of original music, all done to a click, all done to sequences. There's no breaks. There's no stops. You have to play it note for note, exactly like we've always been playing it. So for most people, like, okay, I guess I'll get through it. But I took that as like, okay, I'm going to deliver it, and I'm going to have this show so well, under my grasp that she's never once going to think that her regular drummer's not there.
That's inspiring too.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go beyond. I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to make sure that I know the music so well. I'm going to have everything mapped out. I charted everything out note for note, just in case I needed, to make little notes or changes. I ended up reading maybe 35% of the time I was referencing the charts, but it was on an iPad, so you couldn't really tell I had it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't look like a substitute drummer on stage.
Yeah, everyone's got an iPad in the band pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it was electronic music to begin with, so everyone had computers and stuff, so it didn't really matter. But that for me, and then, she told me after the show, she's like, I didn't think about you once. I'm like, well, good. That was my plan. Like, I didn't want you to be like, you're worrying about cueing me to go to the chorus. Like, you just deliver your songs and I got you covered. And that's, it hasn't turned into any extra work with her, but she stays in touch, and she's still like, if the time comes, I'm sure I would still get another opportunity. And that's happened a few other times. Mm-hmm. So I think just in that, and all of those gigs have come from one person's recommendation. So I got recommended for the tour that I did for 6 weeks from one guy. And because he heard I did well with that, he recommended me to this pop gig. And then he was at that gig and he saw it went really well. So then he recommended for some session work. So it just became, and then all those people have, good memories of what I did with them. So then they're, recommended me for other things. So it's all, for me, it's just been professionalism. It's been, if you say you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah.
And then just keeping those relationships alive without being pushy. Like, I'm not asking him for more work or anything, but right. I like to think that my name is probably one of 5 or 6 that he would, think of first. So yeah, that's kind of been the key. It's just been delivering what you're asked to deliver and being fun and professional to work with, and and not asking too much, not asking for more money, not asking for more work, not being a pain in the butt, not being a nag,
a prima donna.
Yeah, just being there.
So the boring advice, kids, is be nice to everyone you work with and know your stuff.
Yeah, well, this is a lesson that my father taught me very early on. If you're going to do something, do it 100% or don't do it at all. Like, that was just a thing. If you're going to play soccer this year, even if you hate it, you're going to play hard, and you're going to finish the season. You're not going to quit. But at the end of the year, you come to me and say, I don't want to play soccer anymore. Fine. So, and that just stuck with me with everything. Like, if you're going to be in a band, then be the best band you can be. If you're going to go to school and study music, then be the best music educator that you can possibly be. So that's just, in every way, it stuck with me. Like, I try not to half-ass anything.
Yeah, it shows, man. It shows.
There's certainly times when I've had to underperform just because of deadlines or being a little bit stretched thin. But yeah, I think even then, in that case, because of those certain work ethic that he instilled in me, that even my less than 100% effort is still probably exceeding what is expected of me, I would hope. So yeah, that just stuck with me very early on. Like, if you're going to play baseball, you're going to play, and you're going to make the All-Star team, and then you can quit this next year. It was just one of those mindsets that really is. At the time, I was like, man, you're being kind of brutal here, but it was a great lesson. Like, don't quit and don't do something that you can't commit to.
The third of my fourth guests for this best of installment of the podcast is Lisa Leuschner Andersen. She was featured back in episode 33. She is studio partner at Greaseland Studios, the acclaimed Greaseland Studios in San Jose, California, with her husband, Kid Andersen. She was featured in seasons 2 and 3 of American Idol and in Showtime at the Apollo. We talk about her contributions at Greaseland Studio, how she got a gig she was dying to get with Neverland, the Michael Jackson tribute band of the San Francisco Bay Area, and something that she, Kid Andersen, and various guests of Greaseland do on Facebook, something called Bedtime Jams. Here's me and Lisa Leuschner Andersen. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. I do apologize. We are back on the air after a little bit of technical issue. We were talking about Foreverland, and unfortunately, we were cutting out a little bit because of those dropped packets. But tell me about how you found the band and how you're getting the gig came about.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry about that. Everyone that knows me knows that I'm such a huge fan of Michael Jackson. And so I had heard about the band kind of like through the grapevine, and but it wasn't until, I guess, one of their singers was moving, and they were holding auditions. And so I heard about this through the convoluted connection I said last time, which is basically the old drummer of the Nightcaps, his wife went to church with someone in the band. So anyway, they were having auditions, and I wrote them an email at like 4:00 in the morning and was like, just super enthusiastic. And I've never done that before. I've never really put myself out there, but I thought, if I'm going to do kind of like a cover band, type thing, then it's got to be something I really love, and I love Michael Jackson. So, so I wrote them an email and I said, "You need me. I love Michael Jackson so much, and what do we got to do to make this happen?" And they said, "Come on in and audition," and the rest is history.
Was that in San Francisco that you auditioned?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I gathered that they're based out of San Francisco, and you were also, as your voice was dropping out earlier, you were also mentioning the timeline. When did that happen?
2012.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Cool. And said
it was kind of perfect. Sorry about that.
No, I was going to say you said that something to the effect of it was the first time you'd really put yourself out there. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, I've been in lots of bands, and I've I've done a lot of projects and just different things, but I've never really auditioned for like a band, you know, or kind of like begged to audition for a band. So I just kind of, you know, I usually play it a little bit more cool than that, but I couldn't hide my excitement about all Michael Jackson all the time.
That's great. I would imagine that because of your talent and the folks that you surround yourself with, you often get the, hey, you're pretty good. Why don't you come play this gig with us or join this tour with us? And so I can see that happening to you.
Actually, what I hear a lot is, you should audition for American Idol.
Okay, well, since you brought it up.
Really? Yeah.
Since you brought it up, tell me a story about either American Idol, I was going to ask, or Showtime at the Apollo, or both if you want.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did American Idol. I would say that was kind of like my first, that was kind of like how I started only doing music, you know. I used to work at a hotel and, you know, was kind of going to go into like the normal having a day job and being a musician, you know, at night type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but once I auditioned for American Idol, I realized I didn't have any time to have a day job or do anything else. So that kind of set me on my path of only doing music. And I'm actually glad, though, because I never really looked back. I'm not really cut out for a 9-to-5 job anyway. So
you quit that silly hotel job and went and worked on American Idol?
Yeah, never looked back. But American Idol was really fun. It was really, really hard, really difficult. Like a lot of people, that's kind of their first question. They're like, wasn't that fun? And I'm like, I wouldn't really use fun to describe it. It's not that it wasn't fun, because it was, but it was just more, you know, hard. It was just more difficult. And I think the only thing I really wish that I had known before I kind of went on the show was, like, I thought that it was more, like, I didn't realize that it was more a television show than it was like about music, you know, or about talent. It's definitely more like you know, they want to see your reactions more, and they want to see, they want to kind of get you crying, and it's definitely more of a reality show than
talent show.
See how good you. Yeah, exactly. And I thought, oh, well, if I just go on the show and sing, you know, and sing the best I can, then I'll be all right. But it was more about, it was different, you know.
Did you realize at some point in time that it was, oh, hey, this is a reality show, I guess I better be emotional? Or did you just keep on singing your heart out the whole time and just that?
Yeah, I definitely, I couldn't really do the reality thing, you know. I tried a little bit. They got a little frustrated with me, you know. Especially at the time, there was so many things going on. My mom was sick. She just had a heart attack. And so I was really already, you know, emotional as it was. And they really kept pushing me to talk about it. And like, you know, they were like, this is gold. And I'm like, this is not gold. This is, you know.
This is my life.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not a, you know, not, I hate to say it like this because I'm not trying to knock anyone who does the show and is open about their life or anything like that. You know, everyone's different and that's fine, but I'm not that type of person, you know. I'm not a reality television type person. So I'm more private, you know, so I didn't feel comfortable with that. And then when it was first at the Apollo, that was actually more of like a thing where I said, you know, hey, this will be fun to just go audition with my friends, you know, and you know, stand in line all day in Oakland and see what happens. And and but I really wanted to do it I ultimately wanted to do it because it's such an iconic stage. And I just, I wanted to kind of have that in my back pocket, my bragging rights of being like, hey, I've stood on the Apollo stage and I've done my thing. And, I knew that was going to be, hard, but I don't think I've ever been that nervous before, ever.
Did you get to do the work for Showtime at the Apollo more locally than you did the American Idol stuff? And what season was it, the American Idol stint?
I did 2 and 3 for American Idol.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I made it to Hollywood on season 2, and then I came back for season 3, and that's when I'm final. Yeah, so that was like 2004. God, that's so long ago.
Where did the time go, right?
I know, crazy.
And then did you get to actually rehearse a little more local, or work a little more locally for Showtime at the Apollo, or?
No. I mean, I auditioned in Oakland, and then I went to New York.
Oh.
Yeah, it was crazy. And one thing about Showtime at the Apollo, though, that's really interesting is that, I watched it when I was growing up, and I loved watching it, and I knew that, I knew the objective is to not get booed. I knew that was the deal. You don't want the Sandman to come out and all that. But what I didn't realize was that they film like a week's worth of shows all in the morning. So we filmed the show that I was on at 7 a.m, and already I was like, whoa, and so they kind of just get people off the street to come in and be the audience, and they come in, I think the audience knows that their job, really is to boo you off the stage. That's kind of what they want to get you off that stage, so that was and when I get nervous too, what happens is, my mouth goes dry, so like all the things that you don't want to happen when you're singing happen. So when I walked out there, the first thing they did was boo me, like immediately, like I hadn't even said anything. And they started booing me, and I'm like, okay, all right then.
Wow.
But they edited my performance really well. Either they edited it really well, or I didn't remember it. Like, it's funny. I'm not sure which one is true, but when I watch it back, after it was over, I was like, oh, that was terrible. They were just booing me and they hated it. But then when I watched it back, I'm like, no, they were totally into it. I think they just showed the people that liked it.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Well, I'm sure when you're on stage and you hear anything negative, that's all you can hear.
Exactly. My eyes went straight to the people who were like, get off the stage. And that's all I could really focus on.
Can you talk a little bit about your life and contributions at Greaseland?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think out of all the records that have been done here, I think I sing on every single one. We were looking at them. It was funny because I was trying to, I'm trying to like at least, get like a record of, everything that I've done, my discography, or whatever. It's hard to do because we have every record that we do on the wall in the hallway, and every time someone comes over, I'm like, I sing on this one.
Pretty much all of them.
I think it's pretty much, yeah, all of them. It's just so easy for me, to wake up and do it. But what's funny is a lot of times people will book their set, they'll have it all ready, and then they'll come in and Kid will be like, yeah, Lisa can help us out if you need her to, and they're always, some people are surprised because they had no clue. They're like, oh, we have a vocal coach singer who lives here. Perfect.
Oh, so you do a little coaching for some of the sessions as well?
Yeah, totally.
Makes sense.
That. I've done that lots of times. Yeah, and then like for instance, like if I'm home, which like recently there was the Tommy Castro band was here. Tommy Castro, and because he was in the vocal booth and he was trying to do this bridge, and he was kind of writing it as he was doing it, because he had finished some of the lines, and a lot me and Kid often when we're in the house together, we'll text each other, so we just because the pinnacle of laziness, so so I heard him struggling with this line, and I just thought of a line, so I texted Kid, and he was like, "Hey, Lisa just came up with this," and he was like, "Perfect," and it just worked out, and he's like, "Come on in here and sing it then."
So you just in that instance, you just changed his lyric in the melody a little bit.
I fixed it. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
You are handy. Around.
I am. There's something funny about this house too. You can hear. It's funny because you can record here, and it's like a really good house to record in, but you can hear everything. Like if someone's on the porch, you can hear them from the back, or whatever. So it comes in handy, though.
I'll be careful what I say next time I'm over.
Yeah. Careful.
So you're a drummer, too.
And they're recording all the time. Yes, I am.
How long have you been playing drums?
Well, actually, I played, drums for fun since I was a kid, but really Kid has been kind of forcing me to get out there and play. And
get over here and do this track for us.
Pay a drummer, really. Yeah, exactly. But my father is actually he's a great musician. He's like he's a genius. He can play anything, but he was always such a great drummer, growing up, that I was like, well, why should I play, because he can do it, and he's awesome. But now he was like, you're a chip off the old block, and he's been teaching me stuff, and you can tell he's really proud, because he's like, oh, we got another drummer in the family.
That's great. And it looks like you you can sing and play as well.
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's fun though.
So I don't know if you knew this, but I'm a drummer and have been singing and playing for a number of years too. And I find it pretty challenging. It's not the most enjoyable thing. I'd rather just sing or just play drums. But I saw saw some pictures of you singing and playing, and now that I'm talking about it, because I wanted to tell you during our conversation that I need to schedule some time with you to do some vocal coaching at some point in the future. And now that we're talking about the fact that you play drums and do it a little bit too, that might be helpful as well.
Totally. Yeah, I know. I don't think people realize how hard that is. It is. I mean, I guess you see people play guitar and sing all the time, but there's something special about keeping that beat and singing, two completely different things.
Yeah, I didn't really think a lot of it for a long time. I had always just told people when they mentioned it that, well, but it's like playing any instrument and singing, right? Your fingers are, your mind's doing something else while it's working on the whole motor skill and the pitch exercise of singing. But then I realized, after decades of playing that with drumming, depending on the situation, you're actually exerting some energy from all the movement that just doesn't come with every instrument. So maybe, I guess it's a little more, demanding than I ever admitted. But I mean, I knew it was demanding for me.
Give yourself more credit.
Yeah. I know it's always been demanding for me, but I'm like, well, everybody play, all these guys that sing and play an instrument, they're doing the same thing. But now that, sorry, I'm going to jump around again, but I almost forgot. I wanted to ask you if you and Kid and Company are still doing bedtime jams.
Oh, bedtime jams, man. Now that was a sleeper hit. Yeah, we're definitely still doing that. It's crazy how much that.
When's the next season?
Really. I know. What's the next episode? You know what's funny is at first when we started it, you know, we've done like 6 episodes now or something like that, and people are like, "When's the next one? We got to know so we can plan." And we're like, "Should we plan or should you know?" It's kind of more exciting for it to be kind of like, you know, we don't know, and so you got to be on your toes, you know.
Yeah. Well, if you were wanting to just get some real traction with it, do it at the same time every month, and people will start tuning in. I guarantee you.
I know. That would be smarter.
And I don't know how easy that is for you guys, but yeah, I've seen a couple and enjoyed them. How long are they? Well, for those who are listening who have no fucking idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. They're like, what are you talking about?
Why don't you talk a little bit about how it came about, what it is, and when you think the next one's going to be?
Bedtime jams, you know, it totally came about just randomly. We were honestly hanging out in bed, me and Kid, and we decided to go live on Facebook and just start, you know, doing some songs and taking requests from the audience, and it was so much fun, and it kind of blew up from the first time we did it that we were like, we got to do this all the time. And I think that the second episode was my birthday, so that made it even more, you know, exciting. And yeah, I think we're going to do one with my brother. We've done one with my dad. We've done, you know, we've had special guests. We had Andy Santana on my birthday one. We got to have Rick Ester on one, you know.
Yeah.
I think we got to have everyone on there.
So
it's going to be, you know,
involving other people, you've had to plan it out a tiny bit, I guess, or if they're around, they're like, hey, let's do a bedtime jams. Let's go change into our jammies. Or are you telling people to bring their jammies or anything?
Yeah, well, actually, we have we have pajamas here that we've loaned out, you know, we've loaned out to people, and yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's been a lot of fun. But it's so funny because I'll be somewhere, you know, where it's just like the bitch strips thing where I'm like, I just am not expecting, you know, someone to say, hey, bedtime jams. And, you know, I got a video message from Switzerland, you know, where they're like, I love your bedtime jam.
That's funny. So that people can have any chance of finding this, because there's not like a page for it. Do you guys usually do it on kids' profile or page?
We usually do it on kids' page, but we do have a hashtag. It's hashtag bedtime jams with a Z. So you can find it that way.
Last but not least, I chose a clip from my interview with David Barrett. David was featured in episode 28. He is an acclaimed music educator, most widely known as one of the top educators for harmonica. He also holds the distinction of having performed live on this podcast, and he is the only guest to have done that. You'll hear that after our little segment here. He is creator of the School of Blues in San Jose, California, and we talk about the inspiration for that and the life lessons it has brought, as well as lessons in community. Here's me and David Barrett.
If it didn't have all these challenges, I'm sure I would have stopped playing a long time ago, because the harmonica is endlessly fascinating. And yeah, so it's interesting. Such a simple instrument ends up being something so complex. And yep, in college, definitely you could play the kazoo as far as they were concerned. Harmonica, kazoo, musical saw.
Yeah, that's what. Well, I never thought about it, and it came to mind as we were talking about the early years of your journey here. And speaking of which, can you talk a little bit about the motivation for creating and the evolution of the School of Blues in San Jose?
Yeah, so you know, there's always been a strong blues scene in the Bay Area, and one of the fun things about the school is that Frank DeRose and Kevin Coggins, my bass instructor and drum instructor, when I was 16 years old and I was playing jam sessions at JJ's Blues in downtown San Jose, they were actually running the jam session with Tommy Castro. And they're now the instructors at School of the Blues. I just think that's such a neat thing that, they were giving to me in the jam sessions. And I remember Frank, he called me up. He would say, great job at the jam. And why don't you think about doing X song at the next jam? And he's still doing that today. He's part of my house band training program at the school. And it's so neat to have people that are so invested in the growth of the students and also I wouldn't necessarily say the preservation of the music, because we're simply just teaching the music to people who love it. So it doesn't need to be preserved because people want to do it anyways. Mm-hmm. But I knew there were people out there as dedicated as I, like Frank and Kevin and John Garcia, who's passed now.
Right.
But John Garcia, who just loved the music. And I thought, when my grandfather passed away, he gave the grandkids a little bit of money. And I used that seed money to start the school. So for me personally, I wanted essentially to have an office to run my harmonica masterclass company, my workshop company, a place where I could go and focus on my writing as well. And a place where not only, and this was the big thing about the school, what would commonly happen in the music stores that I would teach in is that a student would come into their little cereal box of the teaching studio. You would teach them for a half hour or hour, depending on the length of the lessons, and then they would leave. And I managed a music store for 6 years in Morgan Hill, and it was very difficult to get instructors to work together to create something together. It would usually be this piano instructor uses this church on this date, and no one was working together to create what I thought could be something greater. And what I wanted to do for my students was I wanted to give them context. Instead of them just coming in, learning the harmonica, I want to give them context, which means, hey, there's going to be blues guitar students, there's going to be blues bass students and drummers. And what I wanted to do is have combined recitals and also eventually training programs. I'll give you one example of one of the cool things that we do at the school. It's a house band training program. Mm-hmm. What we think of as instructors is like, what would I would have liked to had when I was growing up in the music? What opportunities can we as instructors, because of our place in the industry and the school, what opportunities can we help create for them? I've always thought that not only is it a good idea, I think of it to a certain degree as an obligation. If I have the ability to really give opportunities to people, I feel that it's also my obligation to help that. And so the band training program, once a student is ready to start playing our jam sessions, they play our jam sessions. Once they're ready to have a concert in front of family and friends, which we know is very nerve-wracking, we'll have them in our student concert that happens twice a year. And then if they show a propensity to want to play more and to keep growing, every 6 months we have 2 new house bands. And over this 6-month period of time, they come in and different instructors will run it at different times. When they're working with me, for example, they'll work with me 3 hours once a month plus our jam sessions. And they come in and we teach them what it means to play in a band. We go through all the different grooves. What's a shuffle, a backward shuffle, a double shuffle, a T-bone shuffle, a Chicago shuffle. And we walk them through all the different grooves and show them how to play that on their individual instruments. Openings, endings, breaks, hand signals, how to run an effective jam session, how to put effective set list. And they are actually, these students are the bands that provide the backing at our jam sessions. So not only they're learning how to play in an ensemble setting, and after 6 months, we really feel like they have all the tools to either enter a band or start their own band. The neat thing for the students is I let them know all the time, this jam session's for you. It is not a performance. It's your opportunity just to give a new song that you're working on a try. And guess what? Who you're playing with, this is not a professional band. They're not going to be looking down at you because you make a couple mistakes, because these are students as well that have been there. So students, playing with students, and we really work hard on creating a real nurturing environment. Even where we played, they've since built a stage, but there was no stage to the Poorhouse Bistro right now. It has been for many years.
Right.
There's no lights. I mean, it's just like us getting together and playing. It's evolved a little bit from that, but it's still, we really work hard to keep that nurturing environment. So what School of Blues for me was the opportunity to bring us instructors together and have a place that we can say we all love all styles of music for the most part, but what we really love is blues. And wouldn't it be cool to have a place that's what we teach? And if someone wants to learn a little bit of country or jazz, sure, that's fine. But to be out of a place where you can study specifically blues and be around other people who want to study that, because it's difficult to find. Obviously, we're to a certain degree a subgenre. We're a specialty school. That was really cool, and I've been very fortunate to have the instructors that I have. All of them are the original instructors from January 2002, except John Garcia's passed, and Johnny Catt, who's a phenomenal guitarist, and really enjoy having him at the school. So anyways, that's it. We do private lessons. We record the lessons. If a student comes in, they bring a thumb drive. We digitally record all of the lesson, so when they go home, they can study it. And like my students, they also have not only do they get the jam sessions and the student concerts, I also do harp night every fifth week Tuesday, where we get together, all the students get together, and they play a little bit for each other, and we talk. It's a combination of social and giving them a chance to, especially my newbies, a chance to play in front of other people. And a big thing that I found that was for the school and for anyone who's thinking about starting their own music school someday, and I think anyone who teaches, that's kind of in the back of their head. It'd be really cool to do my own thing someday. What I learned right away, really soon, was two things. One, I knew I needed to provide quality instruction, just myself with my students. So that's obviously a given. You need to provide a quality service for your customers. But what I wanted the school to offer too was that, again, that synergy of everyone wanting to do blues and give them the context of being able to play with other people. But thirdly, what I didn't think of ahead of time was community. What they are, when they come in, they're paying for lessons. They're coming in there or joining the community of School of the Blues. And the things that I can do to help foster that community, like harp night, for example, or a holiday party or something like that, and the opportunities that they are provided by being part of our community, that's really the big thing. I used to be probably too driven as an instructor and too serious and too focused. As the years have gone on, I've learned, this is just something, as I've taken classes in martial arts, for example. A new hobby recently is kayaking, so I'll go out and take classes. This is a fun part of their life, and they need to really enjoy when they come into their lessons. Not only are they going to grow, and grow slower than I was because I was on fire. I'm not going to get a whole bunch of David Barrett students. I'm not going to get a whole bunch of Aki Kumars, for example. Right. But the relationships that I've developed, the friendships I've developed through the years, that's well worth it right there. So community, that was something I didn't realize at first. That became very evident that people are coming into the School of Blues community. So for those who are looking to open a school someday, that you really need to think about that and create a community that you like to be a part of. I think of that a lot too, is that really what I've done is I've created the community that I want to be involved with. So that's a pretty neat thing. I'm fortunate. All right, here we go.
Well, that is it. That's a wrap. Episode 100. Thank you again for being part of the journey. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe to the podcast if you enjoyed it. It helps other listeners find the podcast. Please support the podcast by joining the community, the Unstarving musician community. You will get an occasional email from me as a member of the community with tips, things you can use in your music journey, things that I have learned in my years of experience, and things I have learned from the now hundreds of musicians that I've spoken to as part of the Unstarving Musician project. So yeah, go to unstarvingmusician.com and just do it. You'll be glad you did. If you do, I hope you're glad you did. Thanks again. Hey, I love you. Peace out.